All right, for question number 4 is just going to be following the order of operations. So, one of the big mistakes that students will make, throughout all of a math class is just like going back to remembering the order of operations. So it's very important, not only when you're doing the math like on a piece of paper, but also when like sometimes you're typing into a calculator, if it doesn't understand the order of operations, just make sure you are doing things in the proper order. So therefore you can get the same answer as your teacher on your test or whatever it may be. So whenever you have a order of operations with multiple kind of or multiple parentheses or grouping symbols, always do the innermost one first. Okay. So you can see in this case, you can see I have a 9 minus 2. So 9 minus 2 is going to be a 7. So therefore I have a 21 minus 7 divided by 2. All right. Now, again, remember the first part of PEMDAS or GEMDAS, whatever, is going to be doing those grouping symbols, those parentheses. So 21 minus 7 is going to be 21 minus 7 is going to be a 14. So therefore I have a 14 divided by 2. And now I can just do 14 divided by 2 is going to be a 7. Now, the one thing I want you to notice is, do you notice how I did like one thing at a time? Obviously, the more difficult the problem, sometimes you're going to have to do multiple steps. But I do also think it's really helpful for students to avoid making mistakes by just doing things one step at a time. All right, so in this one, again, we have a couple things going on here. So we have 12 minus a 15. So that's inside the parentheses. We got to do that first. So 12 minus 15 is going to be a negative 3. And now in addition to this negative 3, let's see, in addition to the negative 3, I'm dividing that by a 3 squared. Okay, now again, be careful. Now we have to actually make sure that we're actually writing out what's exactly happening. So in this case, remember PEMDAS. So we have PEM parentheses. Now we have exponents, right? So I have to be able to find my exponent. So 3 squared is going to be a 9. So this is a negative 3 divided by 9. Now, a lot of students will get stuck sometimes because they're like, hey, 9 does not evenly divide into negative 3. And you're right, it does not. So what I'd recommend doing is rewrite it as a fraction. Negative 3 divided by 9 is the same thing as a negative 3 divided by 9 written as with a fraction bar, right? And now you can say that, all right, 9 does not divide into negative 3, but I can reduce this answer, right? I can divide a 3 on the top and on the bottom. And when I do that, I get a negative 1 over a 3. So therefore, I can now say my final answer is going to be a negative 1/3. And again, that negative could be in the top, it could be in the bottom, or you could just go and write it out in front. Now in this example, what you can see here is we have our parentheses, right? So we're gonna have to work on that first. Now inside this parentheses, though, we have a multiplication and we have a subtraction. So let's see here. So if I already did parentheses, right? We have exponents. But again, we got to do the parentheses first. But let's just go through PEMDAS. Now we have multiplication and division, and then we have addition and subtraction. So the reason why I am writing that out there for you is because inside here, I have two operations inside the parentheses. I have multiplication and I have subtraction. Well, multiplication comes before subtraction. Now, again, before I go over this, just a quick review. Just remember for multiplication and division, those are interchangeable. So it's not multiplication comes before division. It's just because it was a little bit easier to say it as PEMDAS for that. Same thing with addition and subtraction. Addition is not before subtraction. Those are like interchangeable. However, there is a divide between multiplication and division and addition and subtraction. Okay. So multiplication and division always come before addition and subtraction. So what that means is I'm going to multiply this 1 times 2 first. So I have a 1 minus a 3. 1 times 2 is going to be a 2. Minus 5, quantity squared, plus 1. Okay, now the only thing left to have in the parentheses is just to subtract. So let's go ahead and subtract. So I have a 1 minus 3. 2 minus 5 is going to be a negative 3. Quantity squared, plus 1. All right, so I've technically gotten rid of my parentheses. I'm keeping them there because I want to make sure you understand negative 3 squared is negative 3 times negative 3, which is now going to make a positive, okay? But there's no other operations I can do inside the parentheses to simplify it. So therefore, that's why we can just leave this off. So I have a negative 3 quantity squared, negative 3 quantity squared, negative 3 quantity squared. So that's going to be negative 3 times negative 3, which is positive 9. So I have a 1 minus a 3 times a 9 plus 1. Okay, and again, just remember, we're going to do the multiplication first. So negative 3 times 9, right? We have to multiply first before we do the subtraction or the addition. So negative 3 times 9 is going to be negative 27. So I have a 1 minus a 27 plus 1. And now the important thing is when you're doing like addition, subtraction, or multiplication, division, always go from left to right. Okay. So here, I'm not going to add before I subtract because subtraction comes first because it's left to right, right? Remember I said they're interchangeable? They are, right? And multiplication and division is interchangeable. Just work left to right. Addition and subtraction is interchangeable. Just work left to right. So what I have here is 1 minus 27, which is a negative 26, plus 1. And negative 26 plus 1 is going to equal a negative 25. And that's going to be my final answer for on that one.